Hello everyone, welcome back to breakHbarriers. My name is Blessing. If this is your first time here, what I do here is talk about culture and human habits. Some time ago, I uploaded this video stating my experience with COVID-19, putting a message out there to the unvaccinated. So when that video was uploaded, one of my subscribers made a comment and said I should also send a message to the vaccinated, because it's the case that most people who are vaccinated feel that because they are vaccinated, they are protected completely from catching COVID-19, which is really not the case. To be able to bring a balance to it, because the message I actually put out there to the unvaccinated was not a judgmental message, but just a message to encourage the unvaccinated not to relent in protecting themselves further. So if they choose not to get vaccinated, I believe it's their right, then they should as well protect themselves in other ways. So that was my message to the unvaccinated. But today, to bring a balance, I would also like to send a message to the vaccinated that because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you're completely protected from catching COVID-19. And even when you catch COVID-19, doesn't mean you're not going to have symptoms, doesn't mean you might not necessarily end up at the hospital, because that's not the case. What the medicals have said is that for those who are vaccinated, the side effect of COVID might not be as high. What I've also found out that even when you're vaccinated these days, there's a term that is being used, fully vaccinated. So there are two. So it's not just a matter of you getting the first shot, but you must get the first shot, the second shot, third, fourth, and so on and on and on. And the message here is that one shot does not protect you for a long time. I think what the medics are saying is that one shot of the vaccine only protects for a few months. I think around about 1 to 3 months, and after 3 months then you have to get a second shot, and so on and so on. So it depends on your immune system, because there are also cases whereby those who are vaccinated or fully vaccinated still end up being hospitalized. And secondly, I've heard of cases where those who are vaccinated are judgmental of the unvaccinated, which is really not an intellectual way to view things like this. Could be hypocritical, because even after getting fully vaccinated, having 3 or 4 or more shots of the dose, still end up catching COVID-19, and by so doing can still spread COVID-19 by infecting other people because they test positive to COVID-19. Alright, so I'm going to leave you with this video right here, and with this I say thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Research, you're a PhD, you're a consultant for endocrinology. I know you've got a special interest in the infinitely complex disease of diabetes as well. You're a consultant in internal medicine, and you're a general practitioner. Yeah. And I believe you're currently an associate professor in the Department of Medicine of Endocrinology and Diabetology in Graz in Austria.
Yes.
Yeah, good. And you did a PhD from the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics in Amsterdam. Yeah. So you've been around Europe quite a bit. So we want to talk about what we might call natural immunity, I guess. I mean, can you just sort of introduce us? What is this concept of natural immunity? What is it? How does it occur?
I mean, I have the epidemiological view and perspective when I look at this. And the way I look at this is very simple. I just want to look at patients who had SARS-CoV-2 infections, and then I want to know, are they protected afterwards and how long are they protected? I mean, we can discuss for hours about immunology. I'm not an immunologist because I think we have to focus on clinical endpoints, on clinical data. That is really what matters. And you see a lot of studies measuring antibodies, measuring T cells, B cells, and whatever. What I want to know is just, am I protected after an infection? How efficient is this protection? And how long does this protection last? And these are very simple questions, and that is what we wanted to address in our research.
Absolutely. Let's go for it then. And I think we should say I've been studying your paper for the past few days. It's quite excellent. It's available as a free download, so we'll put the link on and people can get it. And I must say, I did find that it very accessible. That any intelligent lay reader could make sense of that. So let's start off with that then. If someone's infected with SARS coronavirus 2, they're going to develop some sort of immune response. Just talk us through it, the type of immune response you get, how long it's going to last for.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the assessment of reinfection, because when we look at this, we want to know, do you get a reinfection and at what time to get a reinfection? The first problem that we have, when can we talk about reinfections? And usually the definition is that we can only talk about a reinfection 3 months after your first infection, because many patients have a viral shedding for several weeks and months.
Yeah.
And that is the first thing we have to consider when we talk about this. And well, if I am allowed to start how I jumped into this topic, then we'll start with that.
Please do.
Well, at the end of 2020, I was a lot discussing with my wife about COVID-19. I always ask her, what is the measure in Austria, what am I allowed to do and what not? And we couldn't believe that at that time, at the end of 2020, there were virtually no data available for national surveys on reinfection risk in those already infected. And I am convinced that this is very important for two main reasons. And the first one is being, of course, the more people are infected, and if they are protected, we can better predict the further course of this COVID-19 pandemic. And that's very important, in particular in these days. And the second reason was to go into this research direction is when we started with vaccine campaigns, when we started with vaccination, we had a shortage of vaccines at the beginning of these campaigns, and it was extremely important to prioritize the vaccines, to have the most efficient use of vaccines. And at that time, it was important to know about natural immunity, and that's why we started to look at this in Austria, because I still believe we could have saved many more lives with vaccines if we would have prioritized within the same risk groups according to the previous infection status. And well, what I did in the beginning was very simple. In Austria, I was very lucky to have access to the Austrian national data that were released by Franz Allerberger, and I could collaborate with this team. And we had a very simple concept. We looked at individuals in Austria who had a SARS-CoV-2 infection, the first wave, and then we reassessed this group of previously infected patients 6 to 8 months later, and we compared their infection risk with the rest of Austria, and we found a 91 protection against reinfection in this group. So we had a huge effect size. We really have a huge effect size for protection against reinfection with SARS-CoV-2. And this was after 6 to 8 months. So we already at that time, this was 1 year ago when we released this original study, we knew that natural immunity lasted for at least 6 to 8 months. And there was no sign of waning immunity in our study. So we knew we could expect that natural immunity lasts quite long. And at the moment, with more studies coming up, with more studies confirming about this effect size of 80-90% for natural immunity, in terms of protection against reinfection, we see longer and longer follow-up periods. And we do have data now from the United States. There was the group by Kim and Rothberg, and they published that even more than 390 days after your first infection, you do have a significant protection in the range of 87%. So we know natural immunity, you get a high protection against reinfection and also against severe disease. And this is lasting for more than 1 year. And from the evidence we have, there is only if at all, a moderate waning immunity of over 1 year, and it will last more than 1 year. That is also what we know, and that's in particular importance when we look at the next season. So those who are infected this season, they will also have some kind of protection, a very good protection against reinfection the next winter. And this really matters. And if I may continue,
please.
I think that at the moment with the Omicron wave, we see that this protection also of natural immunity really works, because you see we have a lower proportion of hospitalizations and of deaths. And in the beginning there was the discussion, maybe Omicron is such a mild disease, it is not that severe as the other variants. But we know right now that the major reason why Omicron is so mild is not that Omicron is so mild per se. It is because we have such a high immunity in the population. Of course, it's vaccine-induced immunity and it's natural immunity. And we have countries where we see these numbers going down in terms of hospitalization and deaths, where we have a high vaccination uptake, but also countries, take Africa or South Africa, where we don't have that, and we see this numbers going down. So I think we are at the moment with this working together of vaccines and of natural immunity somewhere at the end of this COVID-19 pandemic. And these are really, really important news for everyone. And we should be happy, very, very happy about this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that first encouraged me when I learned that in the 2002-2003 SARS coronavirus one outbreak, people still had neutralizing immunity and clinical protection 17 years later in 2020. So you're saying we're getting like 87% protection after 390 days. What's kind of your best estimate about the longevity here? Do you think it could be years or into a decade or more like the original SARS variant, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm focusing on clinical data. So we don't have the clinical data for many years, and there's always some uncertainty around this data. We have bias, we have confounding in epidemiological studies. But from immunological studies, from antibody data, and also what you mentioned from measuring other parameters of the immune system, we could expect that it lasts for several years. So this is what we can really assume for natural immunity. And you mentioned we also have other coronaviruses that are also endemic in our population. And these do not cause a lot of harm to us because we have our first infection when we are child, so in 3, 4, 5 years old, and then we get reinfected and we build up natural immunity, and it doesn't do harm. And some colleagues of mine, there's great science papers about that. They assume that what will remain from SARS-CoV-2 is a first infection as a child, as a young child, and then we get infected, and when we're old, and in 10 or 20 years, you will have many old people, but they have all been infected, and they will not have multiple times and build up their natural immunity. And the good thing about SARS-CoV-2 is that the first infection as a child is very, very mild. So also compared to the flu, that's a very mild infection. And we're very lucky that this is the case. And this will probably remain in a few years ahead from now. But of course, these are only estimations based on the data that we have. And it's never black and white picture. But I think that the data on natural immunity are very, very important, in particular because we know at the beginning of 2022, we can estimate that probably more than half of the world's population has already been infected with SARS-CoV-2. Because what we know when we're watching this data on Worldometer and all these reports on